James Locker, The Duality of Fate, 2019 edition. Chapter 1. A New Detective. 1.1 Prologue. Crime Inspector James Locker was lying awake in his bed, sweating profusely. He had stopped taking his antidepressants, which was necessary to feel anything at all and live a healthy life. James Locker was thinking about her, and he still could not comprehend what had happened that fateful day 7 months ago. James and Emily Long had been in a massive fight. Why had they fought? His memory was so blurry so that he, in retrospect, could not understand it. She had left with $20,000 of their savings, and a day later he had received a text message stating that she despised him and that she never wanted to see him again. Of course, he could have filed a police report with the Stolen Property Department, as she had stolen his money. But he never did, as money was not an issue for him, and his primary concern was to understand what had happened so he could avoid it happening again. James had loved Emily too much to report her to his colleagues and have her deported. He thought about calling her, but he did not. Ironically, James' career had improved a lot during the 7 months that had passed. He had been able to solve some high-profile cases through his intelligence and dedication to his work. Walking in an emotional desert was apparently a good thing when it came to solving murder cases. And James had been promoted to the rank of police inspector a few months earlier and seemed to be in line to further promotions if the legendary crime detective Michael Fuller was to resign. That wasn't likely to happen anytime soon, as Michael Fuller was 9 years away from retirement, and Michael was the man who was living for his work. In this way, James had become very similar to Michael in the last year. James Locker's nightstand clock showed 3 a.m. and it was 5 hours to go before he and his colleagues and best friends, Thomas Anderson and Adam Smith, were bound to head to the airport for a month of traveling in Asia. Adam and Thomas had persuaded him to join them for a crazy month of travels, adventures, boozing, and banging. Adam Smith had put it like this: "Hey, look, James, I know it's been tough for you with this Emily thing, but it's time to man up and meet some other girls. Let's go to Asia and hook you up with at least 10 girls to build your self-esteem again." James smiled, realizing that his friends would probably pay some local talent to pretend to be genuinely interested in him and then sleep with him to build up his self-esteem. James decided to play along with his friend's plan, as he believed that it could work better than psychologist sessions he had attended. If his friends, however, did not intend to pull this off, he would not visit prostitutes on his own. Not because he had any strong moral objections to paid sexual services, but merely because he was not very turned on by the concept. James Locker took a shower, made himself some breakfast, and enjoyed it in front of the TV while waiting for his friends. Despite his insomnia, he felt relaxed, knowing that he would probably fall asleep on the plane, and thus have more energy than his friends once they reached the destination. The date was the 17th of July 2013. Chapter 1.2. A past case summarized at the police station. As 3 broken but happy heroes, James Locker, Adam Smith, and Thomas Anderson came back to the police station a month later. To their great relief, the impressive Michael Fuller had solved another challenging, high-profile case while drinking whiskey in his bathtub. This would give them at least a few quiet days to recover before the heat started again. The police policy was rewarding the staff for solving a case quickly and correctly, as this encouraged staff to work a lot of overtime in the critical first days of a murder case. Since the police department lacked the funds to give performance bonuses, the staff members were rewarded with the cases being divided equally between the different murder investigations teams. Since Michael Fuller was incredibly dedicated at being a detective, this usually meant they would have to work very hard for the first few days until the solution just magically popped into Michael Fuller's head. Often while he was drinking whiskey in his bathtub. It was an internal joke in the department that if they gave Michael Fuller a bathtub and a whiskey bar in his office, he would never need to go home, and the rest of the staff would never need to go to work. This joke was of course not entirely accurate, as it sometimes happened that James Locker solved a case or two. What was true was that Michael Fuller was an exceptional talent, and that more than 90% of the cases assigned to his team ended up with a conviction. Michael Fuller greeted the talented trio. "Good day, mates. Great to see you all. Due to my brilliant brain, I solved another tricky case last Friday, so this won't be the busiest return to work week for you. Let's go to the lunchroom and have a chat about your holiday in my latest case." They went into the lunchroom and each had a cookie. James Locker started the talking. "Hey Michael, I can't get how you solved the last case so fast. From the media reporting, the case was very bizarre." Thomas Anderson interrupted the conversation. He said, "Sorry guys for not following the news while enjoying my life 8,000 kilometers away. What was the case?" Michael Fuller said it was the Father Walker case. A senior Anglican priest was killed and found horribly mutilated. Adam Smith said, "Yeah, we get those cases sometimes. What was the full story?" Michael Fuller said, "We found the priest tied to the altar. His genitals were first corroded away by boiling sulfuric acid, and then half of his face was burnt away using a blowtorch. After that, the numbers 666 were tattooed on his forehead, and finally a sharpened crucifix was driven straight through his heart." Thomas Anderson said, "That's psychotic. How did you solve it? Was it an escaped patient from a mental institution?" Michael Fuller said, "No, it wasn't an escaped patient. You see, this act took a lot of planning. Firstly, the perpetrator would have to sedate the priest to get him tied up on the altar. Secondly, getting all this equipment mentioned would be difficult for a person chased by the government. And thirdly, I got a feeling this case was very personal against this specific man, and not just aimed at any priest." James Locker said, "Yeah, I agree with all these claims, but I don't understand how you could get Agnes Monte Cristo so quickly. I mean, they had not met in 7 years." Michael Fuller said, "Because I'm better than you are, mate. I am more experienced, and I have a wealth of knowledge. You see, I'm not only lying alone in my bathtub, listening to classical music and drinking excellent scotch. The bath and whiskey help my thinking, but to have a method of reflection, a man also needs input from the outside. So, I read a lot. And I have probably read most of the literature related to my job as a crime detective." James Locker said, "I see. What source of ancient wisdom did you apply this time? Michael Fuller said, I found the solution in the Third Amendment to the Anglican religious law written by the Archbishop Humphrey Godspit during the witch hunts in 1734. In this book, I found out that the murder resembled an execution method for a very particular horrible crime. Adam Smith said, So, the priest was a child molester. That seems like an old story these days. Michael Fuller said, Not exactly. The punishment was for a man who raped his sister, and the outcome was a demonic child, i.e., a child suffering from incest-related diseases. James Locker said, So, you found his sister then? Michael Fuller said, Yes, but it was not easy since not a sister existed in Father Walker's family history. But I realized one thing, that the perpetrator must be a woman in Father Walker's past. I asked the church administrator for the names of formerly devout churchgoers who suddenly stopped going. That's how Agnes Montecristo's name came up. After checking the registry, she indeed had a daughter born approximately 9 months after she stopped going to church. These events took place 7 years ago. Adam Smith said, So, how did you proceed? Michael Fuller said, I just confronted her with what I knew, and as I expected, she broke down immediately. But don't worry, even if she changes her mind, we have a lot of evidence against her now. If you are interested, you can read about it in the report when it's time for her trial. James Locker said, I'm sure I will, but until then, I just have a question. Why did she act the way she did? Michael Fuller said, Well, she was very religious and abortion was out of the question. So, to protect her unborn baby from the truth, she left and kept the secret to herself. She did well. She moved to the USA and set up a religious bookshop, which was flourishing. All of this changed a year ago when her daughter got sick, and the hospital deemed that it was due to incest-related diseases. The social services took custody of her child, and this shattered her life. She decided to go back to Australia and get revenge on the man who ruined her life. Thomas Anderson said, A truly tragic and scary story. Adam Smith said, Indeed, but let's now focus on something genuinely uplifting instead. Let us tell you the great story of our wonderful month in Asia. Chapter 1.3 An Awesome Month in Asia. Since the group was not very busy, they went out to buy some coffee at the local coffee shop and then brought it back to Michael's office to chat about their holiday. Unfortunately, Adam managed to turn on the microphone through the intercom, which led to the rest of the Central Sydney Murder Investigation Department hearing their entire conversation. Thomas Anderson said, Wow, how strange this coffee tastes. I can't remember when I last had a non-alcoholic drink, apart from water, that is. Michael Fuller said, So, you did not drink coffee at all in Asia? The caffeine withdrawal must have been killing you. Thomas said, We drank heaps of coffees, boss, just that all the coffees were of the Irish variety. The problem with drinking Irish coffee in Thailand, however, is that you must get it mixed with the local Thai whiskey, which had a rancid taste. But since they charge an arm and a leg for real scotch, we just had to suck it up and drink it anyway. The effect is the same, and after a few drinks, your taste buds numb off, and it all tastes the same. Michael Fuller said, "Yeah, so say the Aboriginal goon drinkers as well. But I'm a well-paid man with sophisticated taste, so I only drink whiskies that come at around $100 a litre." Adam Smith said, "Oh, anyway, the lousy whiskey had an impressive effect on James, who had managed to outperform even the highly set hunting goals we had in mind for him. For the first time since Emily came into his life, he was the pickup artist we all know he can be." Michael Fuller said, "Hunting goals? Let me get this straight. You guys set up a goal for how many women James should have sex with?" Adam Smith said, "That is correct, sir. You see, according to Neil Strauss in the game, the best way to get over an ex-girlfriend is to hook up with 10 random women. Since we have been listening to James whine about Emily for 7 months, we thought it was time to get him laid to end the whining once and for all." And how he did it, 12 women in a month. The master hunter is back. Michael Fuller said, "So, you guys bought prostitutes in Asia and now you brag about it? How lame is that?" James Locker said, "To be fair, Adam's story is not accurate. I did date the same woman for most of my time in Asia, but sadly, I did not feel that she was what I'm looking for. I had sex with 2 other women, but that is far from the man whore Adam describes me as." Adam Smith said, "I stand corrected. To be fair, since I did not put a spy cam in James's hotel room, I don't know what he did with the women he brought there. He did, however, bring 12 women to his room during our holiday. But he is right about the women not being prostitutes. His cover story about going to a third world country to find true love, also known as buying a wife, worked out just fine. Since he's only 32, have a fit body and a hot face, he was a lot more attractive than the competitors who were generally over 45, fat and ugly, I must say." Adam Smith was interrupted when the newest addition to the team, Samantha Robinson, entered the room. She was 22 years old and fresh from the academy. Samantha was around 170 centimeters tall, weighing around 60 kilos. She had the perfect mix of strength and physique as well as femininity. Samantha was a beautiful policewoman and would probably have won the Hottest Policewoman of the Year competition if the Sydney Police Department promoted such a contest, which they did not. She smiled at Adam Smith with a very sarcastic smile. Samantha Robinson said, "Great to have you back, guys, and it's even greater that you are sharing the best of your stories via the intercom." Adam Smith panicked and turned off the intercom, and the other guys did not feel at ease either. Samantha said, "Don't worry, guys. Adam's voice is the only one that I could hear, probably due to him sitting closest to the microphone." The other guys looked relieved, while Adam Smith looked like he was getting close to a panic attack. Samantha Robinson said, "Oh, and don't worry about me reporting you to HR. I don't mind you sharing your hunting stories, although you should do so at the pub during after-work drinks and not over the intercom. Oh, and Adam, I bet you $100 that the bitch is angry with you right now." The bitch was the commonly used nickname of Barry Itch, the head of the Central Sydney Murder Investigation Department. He had received his nickname because of the email addresses in the CSMI department that was in the format of initial plus last name at csmi.gov.au. which led to the email address of Barry Each as bitch@csmi.gov.au. Barry was a very tedious and annoying person who, through his drive for political correctness and anti-discrimination policies, was the de facto dictator of the department, as he had a rigid interpretation of anti-discrimination policies where most things could be offensive to someone. Barry Each was very easily offended, so most of the time anyone in the department felt offended, it would be Barry Each who was behind the report. He was thoroughly disliked, and there were two disparate theories in place as for why he acted the way he did. Michael Fuller and James Locker thought he acted the way he did to overcompensate for how he acted when off duty. From this point of view, they believed that he was living in a sadomasochistic relationship with his wife, and thus acted overly politically correct to cover this up as he lived in shame of his real behavior. Since both Michael Fuller and James Locker disliked people who they believed were beating up their wives, they disliked Barry Each thoroughly. Adam and Thomas, on the other hand, saw Barry Each as a whinger who was dominated by his wife, Wanda Each, also known as the Witch. They both felt that Barry Each was making their lives difficult, and his focus on promoting values instead of results had cost them both well-deserved promotions and pay raises. They were both stuck on their entry-level salary even though they had 6 and 4 years of work experiences in their field. They hated his guts. Adam Smith swallowed the frustration over his mistake, sighed and spoke. He said, "Well, I guess I'd better go to his office and apologize before the fucker has time to sharpen his knives. See you later." Adam Smith left the room, and Thomas Anderson, who had a long-time crush on Samantha Robinson, felt compelled to say something. Thomas Anderson said, "Hey Samantha, just so that you know, I don't share Adam's values and I don't like the way he speaks about women." Samantha Robinson said, "Why is that? You are his best friend and you hang out with him all the time. You can't honestly think that I believe that you don't share the same values?" Thomas Anderson said, "Well, yes, but there is more to me than that. Please have dinner with me sometime so I can show you my better sides." Samantha Robinson said, "Well, sadly, Thomas, this is the saddest attempt ever for 2 reasons. 1, if you're doing this because you are afraid of me reporting you to HR, you are wasting your time and money. I have no intention whatsoever to report you in for any of that anti-discrimination bullshit. I have a full understanding that you are discussing your conquests with your friends. I do that as well. Number 2, if you're doing it because you have a crush on me, you should not hit on me by pretending to be someone else. I like men and women, but I don't want an insecure boy who is lying to get into my pants. I'm sick of women, so if you can prove to be a man to me, you may take me out to dinner and maybe get lucky. Oh, and I kind of like Adam. So don't pretend to be different from him. Unlike Adam, you are also good looking." Thomas Anderson was left speechless by Samantha Robinson's words. She studied him for a while and then shook her head and left the room. After a while, Thomas Anderson found his words. Thomas Anderson said, "Oh my God, she is so hot. I think I'm in love." Michael Fuller said, "Well, mate, don't sweat yourself. Playtime is over. Time to get back to work." 1.4. Michael Fuller gets busted. Michael Fuller was working on the report for the Monte Cristo case. The whole concept of report writing bored him a lot. The police report before a murder trial could easily span over a total of 1,500 pages, and in a lot of the cases, the report writing for the court took more time and resources than apprehending the perpetrator. Luckily for Michael Fuller, Barry Each had implemented a procedure where ghostwriter wrote most of the police reports, which gave more time for Michael Fuller to do what he enjoyed doing and was good at: solving murder cases and apprehending criminals. Having said this, it still took a lot of effort to make a report, since he had to review the works of the ghost writers and come with necessary input to make the police report consistent with the actual case. Anyway, Michael Fuller was happy that Barry Each had implemented the system with ghost writers, as it at least gave him some more freedom. While reviewing the report, Michael Fuller started daydreaming about his coming holiday. In a few weeks, he would be on a plane to the British Isles, where he would attend the Castles and Whiskies tour. The tour consisted of 3 weeks in Great Britain and Ireland, and during this time, Michael would stay at 14 different castles and enjoy the local specialties when it came to whiskey. It would be amazing to see some of the places where they made his favorite browns, and he could not wait to taste them in their natural environment. The only thing that made him sad was that he had to go on this tour alone. All his friends were either busy with their families, or in the cases where their children had reached adulthood, they usually had a wife who did not approve of them spending all their annual leave going to Great Britain for a whiskey tour. When thinking about this, he felt sad that he was not close to his 21-year-old daughter, Rebecca, from a failed marriage. He had asked her if she wanted to join him at his expense, but she had responded that whiskies and castles were not her things. The problem with this, of course, was not that she did not like whiskey, but rather the distance between them. She had accused him of being distant to her and focusing too much on his work during her childhood, an accusation he could agree on. What to do about it now? Oh well, she is graduating from police academy next year, so maybe she will understand by then, he thought to himself. He was interrupted in his daydreaming by a phone call from Barry Each telling him to come by his office immediately. Oh well, no point in beating around the bush, he thought, and headed over. Michael Fuller entered Barry Each's impeccably clean and orderly office, which to Michael Fuller signaled that apart from being tedious and annoying, Barry Each also had a slight hint of OCD in his personality. Barry Each said, "Welcome, Michael. Please have a seat." Michael Fuller said, "Thank you, Barry. Is this about the intercom incident earlier today? Because I agree with you that Adam's behavior earlier today was inappropriate." Barry Each said, "Great to have your support on this, Michael, although I find it surprising that you agree with me and still did not interrupt him. Nevertheless, this incident will only affect Adam's career prospects, and it seems likely that he will not receive any pay rise this year either. I surely hope he will enjoy unpaid participation in 5 days-long workplace equality seminars held by my wife, Wenda Each, on Saturdays." Barry Each smiled grimly while Michael Fuller sat in silence. Barry Each continued talking. He said, "No, the reason I called you over is the Lopez's case. I hope you recall it." Michael Fuller said, "Yes, of course. It was only 6 weeks ago, and it got massive media coverage. How would I forget? I'm not that old. From the investigation point of view, it's dead end though, with the alleged killer being dead. I'm sure you remember that we handed it over to the organized crime department since the High Command believed there was nothing more we could do from our end. Barry Itch said, yes, that case was a real disgrace for the entire police department, with 2 airport police officers sent to the intensive care unit with severe injuries and the hired gunman, Angelo Ramirez, shot at the airport. Sad for the city's reputation. Michael Fuller said, I seriously don't follow you. We got a picture of the killer's face from a hidden CCTV camera that showed us the whole chain of events. Of course, we matched the description with our database of suspected hitmen. Anything else would be negligence of duty. Furthermore, once we identified him, we found out that he just had passed the passport checkpoint at the airport, and we had to have the airport police arrest him, as we could not get there in time ourselves. All done by the book. Barry Itch said, you're missing the serious point of this. The CCTV feed shows a suitcase on a desk at the time of the murder. We can see that Angelo Ramirez was not taking the bag while leaving. A bit after the killing, the CCTV feed ends, and in your report, there was no suitcase mentioned. Michael Fuller said, because there was none. I don't know what happened in the period between the murder and the time we got there. I have not thought much about it as the case was handed over to the organized crime department. Barry Itch said, well, here is the problem. The organized crime department has received an anonymous tip about you having illegal drugs that you stole from the crime scene. Michael Fuller said, that's preposterous. Why would I steal the drugs? Barry said, because of the street value that it has of at least $100,000. Look, we can do this in 2 ways. Either I contact the internal investigations while you remain detained in a holding cell, or you can just stay in my office while 2 men from a private security company I'm cooperating with search your house. You see, I don't want the reputation of this department sullied down by your supposedly criminal activities. If you do agree to have your home searched by the company Sydney True Blue Security Inc., please sign this indemnification form, and all their findings will be between you and me. Michael Fuller said, well, I don't want my life turned upside down by internal investigation guys. Please let me sign the contract, and here are my house keys. Barry said, great, just sit tight and we'll search your house in no time. At 8 p.m., after 3 hours of intense waiting in Barry Itch's office, 2 men in suits came in. Greg Bloom said, so, we found this bag containing 3.5 kilos of cocaine in Michael's basement. It's full of Michael's fingerprints and some DNA which we believe is his. We have taken pictures of where we found it. How do we proceed? Barry Itch said, that's a great question. Michael, how do we proceed? Michael Fuller got pale from fear and shock. He said, you set me up! That is not my cocaine. I have never seen it before. Barry said, well, that's your version, of course. But the facts remain. The bag disappeared from your crime scene. It was found in your house, and it's full of your fingerprints. But rest assured, I have no interest in ruining the reputation of this department and its most famous co-worker. So here is the deal. I overlook this event, and in return, you sign your immediate resignation, stating health reasons. That way, you can live a retiree's life while the reputation of this department stands firm. Do you agree? Michael Fuller realized that he had been set up. But by whom? And why would Barry Each set him up? He quickly decided that he did not want to take his chances with a long-term prison term at stake to keep his job. Michael Fuller said, "I accept and sign my resignation immediately. How do we proceed?" Barry Each said, "Well, you hand over your gun and police ID. After that, you go to my toilet, open the bag and flush down the cocaine. I want nothing to do with it." Michael Fuller did as Barry instructed. Barry Each shook his hand and said, "I'm sorry things ended this way. You were the best detective we have ever had. I hope you find something positive to do with your life." Michael Fuller said nothing and left the station. 1.5. James Locker had a twisted dream. James Locker woke up in the middle of the night. The nightstand clock showed 3 a.m. How long had he been asleep for? From what he remembered, he came home around 6 p.m. and crashed instantaneously. It felt like he had been asleep for an eternity, and that the sleep had been deep and dreamless until the last 5 minutes before he woke up. He had dreamt about her for the first time in over a month. Emily Luong had looked so different in this dream compared to his previous. In those old dreams, she always looked beautiful, like a paradise long gone. In this dream, however, the essential features were the same, but the magic were gone, and the loving smile had twisted into an empty shell. Was that fear he had seen in her blank gaze? Or was it something else? Was it the gaze of a person that was dead inside, or even physically dead? He had to get the picture out of his head somehow. James sat up on the bed, even though it was an August night and his room was cold. He was sweating profusely. His hands were shaking roughly, and his vision was blurred. He had seen these symptoms in a lot of people, the symptoms of alcohol withdrawal. Well, I guess that's what a month of heavy drinking would do to you, he thought. As James did not intend to end up an alcoholic, so he would just have to live with the physical symptoms until they disappeared. He thought about what his friends had said about getting rid of the memory of a loved one by hooking up with random women. In his case, it seemed that this process had not removed the memory, but rather twisted it to a worse one. He considered the option of what was the worst. Having a very positive memory that nothing in your everyday life can compare with, so your daily life becomes dull and pointless? Or have a very negative memory that comes back and haunts you in your nightmares? Oh well, they are both curses, James concluded. Now all he needed was to stabilize his emotional life and get rid of his anxiety. He took one of the antidepressants for the first time in 6 weeks, and he soon fell asleep to a dreamless, unemotional sleep. 1.6. James Locker gets promoted. Barry Each was contemplating his options on how to proceed. Since Michael Fuller resigned, the team needed a new detective. Looking at the length of service and chain of command, the natural officer to promote would be John Dean, who had always been close to Michael Fuller and had a lot of experience, as he had served in the team for 15 years. But Barry Each had some objections to promoting John Dean, since he considered it likely that John Dean had been an accomplice, or at least known something about the cocaine scandal involving Michael Fuller. Secondly, he did not feel that John Dean was a natural leader at all. It's one thing being the right-hand man of a genius who solves most of the cases single-handedly, and an entirely different thing being the one in charge, presuming responsibility. Third and finally, he had never liked John Dean on a personal level. Another option would be to promote someone from another team to lead his team. Barry did not enjoy this idea either, as there had been no one who had stood out positively in other groups. In the best of worlds, he would get an outstanding detective to transfer from another metropolitan area. Brisbane had a few good ones, for instance. So the CSMI got in some new blood and some fresh ideas. This plan would take some time, however. Barry each looked at James Locker's file. James Locker had had an unusual and bizarre development. James Locker had suffered from severe depression for the last 7 months, medicated with heavy antidepressants. Strangely enough, James Locker had an outstanding track record for this period of time, outperforming even Michael Fuller himself. Barry each finally found the solution. He would offer James Locker a 3-month amendment to his contract where he was serving as a provisional detective for the team. If he turned out to be a great detective, he could always be offered the position permanently afterwards. And if not, the official version would be that James Locker was only intended for the temporary position, and it was always Barry's intent to get the replacement from another metropolitan area. Barry called James to come over to his office, and a few minutes later, James entered the office. James Locker said, "Good day, sir. What gives me this great pleasure?" Barry each said, "It's about Michael. He suffered from some severe liver problems yesterday and will probably be away for at least 6 months. I told him that the most sensible thing to do would be to resign considering his age, which makes him eligible for sick leave pension if we look at his liver condition as a work-related issue." James Locker said, "Oh my God. This is a tremendous loss for the team. Michael is the best detective Sydney has ever seen." Barry each said, "Yes, and that's why I called you here. But first I need to know, how is your depression going?" James Locker said, "Oh, it has improved a lot. I make it through most nights without my antidepressants, and I have not experienced any daytime issues for over 2 months now." Barry said, "That is great to hear. Well, I have some good news for you. I have reviewed all the police inspectors at the CSMI, and you're the one with the best results over the last 6 months. You even superseded Michael Fuller's outstanding performance." James Locker said, "I am delighted to hear you say that, sir." Barry said, "And I'm happy to see such advancements among my subordinates. And that's why I called you over. I plan to hire an outstanding detective from another metropolitan area to take command of the team. But since it will take time to find and recruit the right candidate, the team will need a provisional detective for 3 months. And that's where you come into the picture. Would you be interested in this opportunity?" James Locker said, "Well, sir, I must say this came as a surprise and I have not considered the option until now. But of course, it's a great opportunity, so I accept your offer." Barry each said, "Great. Please sign this contract then. Your first task will be to lead the team meeting that I'm setting up this afternoon. Godspeed, detective." James Locker said, "Thank you, sir. See you this afternoon." 1.7. James, Adam and Thomas having lunch at the expensive pizza place. Later that day, James had lunch with Adam Smith and Thomas Anderson at pizza place close to the police station. Adam Smith said, "So James, we get an email from that bitch about a team meeting this afternoon and you seem so happy. So you offer both of us pizza at this expensive pizza place. Can these two be related? Are you guys getting married?" Thomas Anderson said, "Well, Adam, you of all people would know that gay marriage is not allowed in Australia yet." Adam Smith said, "Don't worry, Thomas. I'm not going to marry you anyway. And I'm sure there is some country where gay marriage is legal if you ever find a man in your life." James Locker said, "Guys, I do hope you realize that it's this kind of talk that gets your values rating at rock bottom every performance review. You could make a lot more money if you could cut it out." Thomas Anderson said, "I'm sure we'll be all right if Adam stops tampering with the intercom. But tell me, James, what's the occasion?" James Locker said, "Oh, it's great news. You'll find out at the team meeting in a couple of hours." Adam Smith said, "Okay, sounds good." James Locker said, "Hey guys, you are my best friends. Are you not curious?" Adam Smith said, "Hey James, this talk makes me so curious. I'm dying to know before everyone else." James Locker said, "Less sarcasm, please. Oh, anyway, the great news is that Michael's liver finally shut down after all the whiskey in his bathtub, so he had to resign immediately. I will be the one sitting in his office and cashing in his fat paycheck for the next 3 months. Agent Smith, you might start calling me Detective Locker." Thomas Anderson said, "Cheers to that, detective." James Locker said, "Wait a sec, Mr. Anderson. Are you not drinking Coke? Why are you saying cheers with non-alcoholic beverages?" "That's bad luck, I reckon." Thomas Anderson said, "Well, I guess about 80% of my drink is Coke, so let's say I am. I don't know about you, but my alcohol withdrawal has been horrible, so I have decided to cut it down step by step instead of going cold turkey. I'm still 30 years younger than Michael, so my liver should make it for a while longer." James Locker said, "Yeah, my alcohol withdrawal is rough as well, but I prefer riding it out. Oh well, let's head back to the station." 1.8. James Locker's inauguration speech. At 4 p.m., the team was gathering in the meeting room of CSMI. The room was dull and boring. If one were focusing on an unusual angle, that person could see a glimpse of the sun and the harbour. From every other corner, however, the only thing visible was the grey concrete fundament of the highway. The entire team had gathered, including Barry Each, who was the director of CSMI. The group in full consisted of James Locker, Provisional Head Detective for CSMI Team 1, John Dean, Police Inspector, Adam Smith, Police Assistant, Thomas Anderson, Police Assistant, and Samantha Robinson, Police Assistant. It also consisted of the following 4 other police representatives named Johnson, Baker, Chung, and Lee. All in all, there were 9 team members in the room. Barry Each opened the meeting. "Dear fellow officers, the reason you are here today is the sudden and sad resignation of Michael Fuller, who had to resign immediately yesterday due to health issues. Michael was one of the greatest detectives of all times in the CSMI, and he will be hard to fully replace. It's my long-term ambition to hire a prominent detective from another metropolitan area, as I believe that this team needs fresh ideas, being led by Michael for the last 15 years. For the next 3 months, however, you will be led by James Locker, who is appointed provisional detective, effective immediately. James, it is your turn to speak. James Locker went to the podium and overlooked the team he was supposed to lead. To James, it seemed like most of the colleagues were favorable towards him, although many of them seemed shocked that they had lost the man who was their patriarch for all these years. From John Dean, however, James received another signal. The signal of a cold, hateful gaze. James Locker cleared his throat and started his short speech. James Locker said, "Dear team members, due to health issues, Michael Fuller had resigned from his position. Losing Michael leaves us in a troubled position as we didn't have time to make a handover of his duties. Furthermore, we have lost access to one of the sharpest minds that this department has ever seen. However, I implore you to see the opportunities ahead. I have identified a severe flaw in Michael's leadership that is my ambition to remedy." Michael had a lot of faith in his ability, which is usually a good thing. From my point of view, however, he sometimes took it too far and refused to seek the counsel of his colleagues. By doing this, Michael has inhibited some of you from reaching your full potential. I intend to be a lot more open while seeking counsel from all of you, and hopefully this will empower and stimulate you to grow as police officers. So, to summarize, we have lost our strongest team member, but hopefully a new, more open approach to teamwork will make us stronger and even better than before. The team members were applauding, and they addressed a series of minor issues before Barry each finalized the meeting and everyone could go home. 1.9 Thomas Anderson and Adam Smith discussing the events at the gym. Since neither Thomas Anderson nor Adam Smith liked the prospects of becoming alcoholics, they turned down their usual Tuesday night pastime, bowling and drinking, to do physical exercise in the gym instead, and they pushed themselves through a hellish hour of boxing. Afterwards, they chilled out in the sauna, drinking various recovery drinks, and they started discussing the latest events. Thomas Anderson said, "Such a strange day. I wonder what happened with Michael. No one finishes like that, bang boom, because of health reasons." Adam said, "I hear you, mate. I reckon that the bitch is covering something up. But what? And should we be bothered? I say we should not." Thomas Anderson said, "Don't you get curious then?" Adam said, "Yes, I am curious, but we have done enough of corrupt things during our years in the team. We should not put our noses in other people's business. And anyway, are you going to miss him?" "I'm not." Thomas said, "Well, he was condescending, and I was not close to a raise or promotion during the entire time I was working under him. So I guess you're right." Adam said, "Of course I'm right, and now James leads the team. This could be perfect for us. A lot better than if that John Dean had got the promotion for sure." Thomas Anderson said, "True that. There is, however, a few things that freak me out when it comes to James." Adam said, "Oh really? I think he's awesome most of the time. Except when he's whining about some shit. He's paying a psychologist to listen to that whining, isn't he? Why does he have to share it with me?" Thomas Anderson said, "Well, I did not mean that at all, but one thing freaked me out yesterday. Adam Smith said, "What is that?" Thomas Anderson said, "Well, you know when he denied your story about all the chicks he banged in Thailand and instead told Michael the story about how he dated the same girl for most of the holiday?" Adam Smith said, "Yeah, that was lame. But who cares if he can't stand up for being a man whore? After all, he is a career-oriented person and telling your superior inappropriate details regarding your sex life doesn't pay off." Thomas Anderson said, "Well, this might be unverified cold reading techniques, but what I read from James was that he was retelling from memory and not lying." Adam Smith said, "I'm not following you." Thomas Anderson said, "Well, if my theory is correct, James believes that he dated the same girl for a month in Thailand. How can it be? We know that he dated many different girls." 1.10 Michael Fuller seeks an ally on the inside. Michael Fuller was sitting on his couch listening to classical music on high volume. The music was composed by a famous French composer, and to honor him, Michael was drinking brandy instead of scotch. He emptied the glass, sighed, and summarized the facts to himself. Michael couldn't make sense of what had happened to him. Someone tipped Barry Itch off regarding drugs placed at his house. The same person had probably planted the drugs there as well. But how had they gotten Michael Fuller's fingerprints on the bag? And if the cocaine indeed was from Lopez's suitcase, why had his enemies waited until now? And what would be the motive? Michael Fuller wrote down a list of people who would potentially want to set him up. Since Michael Fuller had put a lot of lowlifes behind bars, the list became extensive. For this story, however, the following names stood out on the list. The first suspect, Barry Itch. Speaking of it was Barry Itch that had the means to do it. His suspicious-looking thugs from that security firm, Sydney True Blue, could easily have placed the cocaine in his house and then claim to have found it there to get leverage against him. Speaking against, it was that Barry Itch had absolutely nothing to gain from setting him up. Also that he had thrown out the cocaine in the toilet. Why would anyone corrupt with ties to the organized crime syndicates throw away 3.5 kilos of cocaine to have someone resigned? There were cheaper and easier ways to achieve this. Number 2, John Dean. Speaking for it, John had the means and the motive to do it. He was at the Lopez's crime scene before Michael, and he also visited Michael's house a lot of times. The last time he visited was only a few weeks ago. His motive could be that he was the likely successor to crime detective leading position of the team. Speaking against it, John had been his friend for ages and didn't seem corrupt at all. Besides, only a total psychopath would frame his friend for a crime that could give several years in prison just to get a promotion. Suspect number 3, James Locker. Speaking for it, he and Michael had had their disagreements in the past. James was very ambitious and Michael felt that he could be ruthless at times. Speaking against it, James was not involved in the Mauricio Lopez's case. Furthermore, James was not the natural successor to Michael in the team, so there would be no distinct advantage for James to get rid of him. Suspect number 4, Antonio Di Maestro. Antonio owned the warehouse where Mauricio Lopez was killed. Since it was uncommon that people working for legitimate businesses got shot at work during the middle of the night, Michael Fuller suspected that Antonio Di Maestro's business was a front for cocaine smuggling. Well, both the murder victim and his assassin were Colombians, which strengthened the cocaine smuggling theory. Michael had been deeply unsatisfied with this Mauricio Lopez's investigation and had made inquiries about the case even after it was transferred to the organized crime department. Michael kept thinking about Antonio Di Maestro, who had both the means and the motive to get rid of him. After all, it was easier for a mobster to sacrifice some cocaine to frame a crime detective than hiring a hitman to kill him and create a lot of unwanted attention. Michael Fuller realized that he needed an ally in the police force to further investigate Antonio Di Maestro. Michael Fuller decided to take his chances and called John Dean. Michael Fuller said, "Hi John, it's Michael. We need to talk." John Dean said, "Hi Michael, are you drunk? You should not be drinking with your liver condition." Michael Fuller said, "I can assure you that my liver health is the least of my concerns. I'm calling to see if you can refresh my memory on Antonio Di Maestro and, if possible, send some information about him." John Dean said, "Well, mate, I'm not sure. I'm not allowed to hand out information on ongoing cases to former team members. Besides, I don't have much since the case was transferred to the organized crime department." Michael Fuller said, "I know that, but please meet up with me tonight so that I can tell you my case. There is something rotten in this mess, and I want to investigate it thoroughly." John Dean said, "Well, I'm not sure I'm following you, but I can hear you out for sure. I'm busy tonight. What about tomorrow night?" Michael said, "Great. See you at the sports bar in your neighborhood tomorrow night. Oh, another thing, can you at least give me the address to Di Maestro's mansion? I can't remember it right now." John Dean said, "Well, I strongly advise you against confronting him yourself, but I can't prevent you. The address is the Di Maestro Mansion, the Esplanade, Mossman." Michael Fuller said, "Thank you, John. See you tomorrow." Drunk and against better judgment, Michael Fuller opened a can of energy drink to refresh. He took his car keys and went to his vehicle. "Now, let's see what this bastard has to say for himself," he muttered before entering his car for the 45 minutes drive to Mossman. He checked his watch. It was Tuesday the 20th of August 2013 and the time was 9:15 p.m.